Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really significant story out of the Caribbean, the spectacular collapse of Petrotrin, Trinidad and Tobago's national oil company.
Yeah, it's quite the case study.
We're aiming to do almost a forensic autopsy here, looking at its rise, its dramatic fall, and now this highly contested idea of bringing parts of it back online.
Absolutely. And our mission today really is to nail down what went wrong systemically.
Hmm?
How did this state-owned giant end up with, what was it, $12 billion in debt?
An incredible number.
And then, critically, we need to look hard at the risks involved in trying to restart that refinery now. Is it feasible? Is it wise?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Petrotrin's creation back in '93, it wasn't really built from the ground up, was it?
Not at all. It was basically a forced marriage, an amalgamation of old assets left behind by the multinationals, Shell, Texaco, BP, companies like that.
They were nationalized assets, sort of lumped together.
Exactly, and that's where the first major flaw creeps in. Sources point to this original sin. There was just no comprehensive plan to actually integrate these different pieces.
Ah, okay, so different cultures, different ways of working.
Totally different. You had distinct corporate cultures, incompatible management systems, clashing work practices, all just smashed together without a real strategy.
So inefficiency was almost baked in from day one.
Pretty much. It set the stage for failure long before the massive debt crisis really hit.
Right. Which brings us to the mid-2000s. Oil prices are booming globally, yet Petrotrin starts racking up enormous debt. How does that even happen? It feels counterintuitive.
It really does. But instead of capitalizing on high prices, the company poured billions into these huge capital projects that were, frankly, poorly managed.
Like the refinery upgrades. I remember hearing about those.
Yeah, the gasoline optimization program, the GOP, is the classic example. The budget started around, what, US $750 million?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, it ended up costing over US $1.3 billion. That's not just a small overrun. It points to a fundamental lack of control, of discipline on these massive projects.
And that runaway spending, I assume, had knock-on effects.
Absolutely. All that debt basically starved the core business, the exploration and production side, the E&P. They just couldn't reinvest enough in finding and producing their own oil.
So their own production started to fall.
Plummeted. It went from a peak of around 64,000 barrels per day down to roughly 40,000 by 2018.
And here's the killer paradox, right? You have this massive refinery.
Huge. Capacity over 140,000 barrels a day.
But you're not producing enough of your own oil to feed it.
Exactly. So they ended up having to import over 100,000 barrels a day of foreign crude just to keep the refinery running.
Wow, so the national oil company is actually draining the country's foreign exchange.
Precisely. It became this massive liability instead of an asset. The whole thing was financially unsustainable.
Which leads us to 2018. The company's basically insolvent, drowning in that $12 billion debt.
Yeah.
And there's a huge bond payment looming.
Yep. That US $850 million payment due in 2019 was the final nail, really. The government decided they had to pull the plug on refining.
So what did the restructuring actually involve? It sounds drastic.
It was radical surgery. Petrotrin itself was dissolved. Gone. It was unbundled into a new holding company, Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, or TPHL.
Yeah.
But the key move, strategically, was separating the good from the bad. They ring-fenced the profitable upstream E&P assets.
The oil production part.
Right. That became Heritage Petroleum Company Limited, a clean, profitable entity. Meanwhile, the loss-making refinery, loaded with debt, was mothballed under a different entity, Guaracara Refining. They quarantined the problem.
A clean break then. But now there's this push to restart the refinery, despite everything.
Yeah, there's significant political momentum behind it, but the hurdles are enormous.
Let's list them. What are we talking about?
Okay, first, just the sheer cost to restart. Estimates are floating around US $800 million to maybe even $1 billion.
$1 billion. Just to turn the lights back on, essentially.
Pretty much. And that leads to hurdle number 2. The physical state of the plant. It's been sitting idle for years.
Rusting away.
Degradation is a huge issue. It needs massive, costly, time-consuming inspections and repairs before it could even think about processing crude again.
Okay, cost, degradation. What else?
Third, the fundamental problem hasn't gone away. Where does the oil come from? They'd still be heavily reliant on importing foreign crude. That hasn't changed.
Right, same core issue.
And the fourth hurdle, maybe the most worrying, is what analysts call moral hazard.
Explain that. What does that mean in this context?
It means, especially with state-owned enterprises, decision makers, politicians, maybe unions involved in the new entity might be tempted to take big commercial risks.
Because they know the state, the taxpayer, will ultimately foot the bill if it fails again.
Exactly. There's a real risk that political pressures could recreate the same environment of inefficiency, the same lack of commercial discipline that killed Petrotrin in the first place.
It's like potentially setting up the same failure scenario all over again.
That's the fear, which is why the strategic imperative really has to be focusing on heritage petroleum.
The profitable survivor.
Yes, that's the functioning crown jewel now. The national energy strategy really needs to prioritize maximizing returns from heritage and shielding it from, the kind of political interference that crippled Petrotrin.
So it really leaves you, the listener, with a stark choice to consider. Is the political appeal, maybe the emotional pull, of restarting that refinery worth the very real, very large financial risk of potentially repeating a catastrophic billion-dollar failure?
That's the core question for the country. Is the path forward driven by hard-nosed commercial viability, or is it driven by a kind of political nostalgia that could be incredibly costly?